would say that for the most part, the conversations about the the numbers of the different dimensions and all of that is are man-made concepts to try to deal with what they don't know. And and it and it more or less repeats a mechanical perception that that's the way you can understand all of this is by defining it and labeling it. And that's part of the reason why you can't agree on it is because different people have different experiences of it and their math tells them different things and they get lost in the mechanics of the argument. So
I guess my experience of it is resonance and frequency. So if you have a collective civilization, or if you have quote unquote fallen angels, it is the resonance through choice and cause and effect, just basically universal laws, that puts these different clusters of frequencies together that have different experiences. And then people try to coordinate them in their mind as far as good, bad, high, low entropy, high entropy, and then try to just kind of make mental sense of it all. But the
yep.
way I view it is a collection of frequencies that have a harmony and a resonance that you can tap into. If you choose that you want to desire to experience that or live at that state of resonance. Is that congruent?
Is that congruent? So what they want to say is, first of all, they'd like to define resonance. Resonance is, from a linear point of view, about the harmonics of frequency, which the easy way to see that is to talk about music. And that is a conversation that is basically tied to three-dimensional time and space, to the space-time continuum. So in other words, the whole idea of frequency is an expression of dimensions, and specifically three. So is resonance then confined to the time-space continuum? Actually not. No, it's not. That there can be resonance outside of physical reality. And does everything resonate one with the other? In one sense, no. In one sense, yes. But it's that it's always about the reference. The reference point is always the individual and not how the individual may or may not have agreed within the physical reality domain to experience resonance. Right? So in other words, outside of physical reality, resonance is an experience of the emerging point of reference of an individual flow of energy, which it is also that within physical reality, but within physical reality, it tends to be mediated in part by the agreements and part by our, like our mechanistic experience of all of this. Um, and part of it is that that's partly, at least the way it's all set up right now, it's what we need to be able to be conscious to physical reality. Um, so it becomes then, because then what happens is that within physical reality, we tend to have this idea of what's good and what's bad, which doesn't exist outside of physical reality. So that a lot of what we think, like particularly from a spiritual point of view about what's good and what's not good, or what's holy and what's not holy, is comes out of that perception that everything must be defined as good and bad, or good and evil. And that in itself is just a perception, and is more or less how people deal or don't deal with the unknown, the uncertain, and the ambiguous. Because outside of physical reality, it just all is, and doesn't have a need to create a hierarchy. So, like, for example, like one of the examples they're giving to me is like we have this whole idea of like different hierarchy of angels, for example, which they would say in non-physical reality does not exist.
I could have told you that.
Yeah.
The fallen angels.
Yeah.
Chamuel is much better for
Yeah.
recovering your dreams than Michael, who will
Yes.
protect you from the evil demons.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that. Now, see, and all of that really is some people need a sense of certainty in order to be able to deal with that which is not certain in the world, which is pretty much everything in life. And that's part of the reason why things become mechanistic, is because the assumption, the faulty assumption, is that that's how we're going to be able to deal with uncertainty and make everything certain. We're in the middle of all of that right now, because it would be very easy to, they say, to basically put human beings into two camps. One camp of those that absolutely cannot live without a sense of certainty, and those of us who are not quite so tied so deeply to the idea of certainty. And we don't like creating terms of polarization. However, right now it's pretty polarized. Right? But that's, but then that gives you the key on how to deal with things. Is if you're feeling really uncomfortable in the uncertainty, it's because there is something there trying to get you to be certain. That's how fear works, is to push you into that place where you're so uncertain, you'll follow whatever the fear is trying to make you say or feel or experience or judge. And how we relate to time is very, very, very much a part of all of that. Because, like, say, productivity around time is one of the major standards of, elusive standards that we use to judge people, good or bad.
Okay, so it's the quality and the experience of the awareness of the, I don't know, frequency. Can you just kind of, what are all these different layers then? Is that, again, just trying to make sense of nonsense?
You mean, what are all these layers of what that people talk about, or?
Yeah, I mean, so you have like, you have the layers of the energy bodies, like these 7 layers of the energy body.
Oh,
You have the 12 levels of dimensions of consciousness, um, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, no, all of those are metaphors to try to help us to understand that there's different experiences.
Okay.
Um, and and for some people that puts everything in order, and it puts it in linear order for us. So we're able to discern difference, or we're able to judge difference. But is it exactly that? Well, maybe sometimes it's exactly that, but there's also all kinds of times where it's not that, or it's more that, right? I mean, they would say that the natural flow of everything is fluid, meaning that there's really not that much that differentiates things. But that's how we get to certainty, is by differentiating as much as we can. And it's also very much a power over expression of things. Power with, power within doesn't have this problem, generally speaking.
Yeah, I guess when I entered into the records, which is a non-physical domain, I'm not having to like prove myself that I'm at least to the 6th level of consciousness to be able to get to the 12th level of consciousness, to be able to tap into the all that is, which is pure light. I mean, light is just everything is source.
Right.
So, yeah.
So all of those different, like, yes, all of those different layers are basically put there as a way to decide who can do it and who can't do it. And when it gets right down to it, that's false. Yes, there are certain things that you've got to bring together within yourself to be able to make these kinds of connections, but it's not value judgments. And most of these, like, layers and blah, 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 are used as value judgments that, until you can be in this place doing this, whatever, you can't do the next thing. And that's all assuming that it's a rigid hierarchy, and it's not. It's fluid. The whole thing is fluid. And it's becoming more and more fluid as we go along here. Partly because all of it is reordering itself right now. And so our awareness of connection with all kinds of things are changing greatly, and they will continue to change. So that's why it's better. Like, this is the whole thing about the difference between outside in and inside out, right? Outside in is you've got to go out, figure out all the layers, figure out all the mechanics, figure out all the values, and attain all of it in order to get access. Whereas inside out says you start within yourself with where you feel and know your truth to be, and you follow that. And in that, it's about when you shift to outside to inside out, then it's about how everything moves towards you. And so now it's all about your ability to receive. And there's actually very, very few rules or whatever about that. It's just being open to it and believing that you can receive. And that's what steps you into the fluidity of it. So, yeah, they get it that there's a whole lot of people got to have rules and techniques and skills and blah, blah, blah. And you go through all the levels and then you learn it. And then you get access and then you're, right? But that's just a form of how do you get to be the chosen one. That's all that this is a repetition of that belief that the only way that you get access is because you are chosen. And really the answer to the question is that we are all chosen. That's why we're here. And we didn't do anything to get to be here. We just said, I want to be here, and we came.